Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my fine friends. Welcome to the album wrap episode of season 13 of the Tom Petty Project podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Brown, and this is the only weekly podcast that digs into the entire Tom Petty catalogue, song by song, album by album, and includes conversations with musicians, fans, and people connected with Tom along the way. Today, I'm joined, as I always am, on these episodes by my pal John Paulsen to talk about The Last DJ. So, John, we were chit-chatting offline. Not an album that you listened to a ton before we were going to record this one, eh?
Yeah, I would say we are now in the era of Tom Petty's discography where my number of listens is it probably started to decrease with Echo, but I really like Echo when it came
Yeah.
out. So, but I think after She's the One, Into the Great Wide Open, She's the One that sort of stretched, and then into Echo, and then getting, my life changed. I moved out to California. Music was kind of changing, and just a little bit less of the petty in my life. But I
Yeah.
did give this an immediate listen because I went up to the show at the Olympic. I think there's actually two concerts there. I don't know if I went to the one that was being recorded or
Right.
or not. I was really sick, and I apologize to anyone at the show that I got sick. But I took the train up from Long Beach, and it was nice because the train stopped not too far from the venue, and went to the show, and it was pretty cool. They played the whole album front to back, and then came out and played a set of songs in the encore that were more hits or
Yeah.
covers. So I did get to see this whole album live, and I'm probably one of not too many people that got to do that
Yeah.
in terms of being there live. And you know, as always, when I dig into these albums again for this podcast, there are definitely a few. What's one of my favorite things about doing this with you is that there are a few songs that sort of grew on me, and this is now 24 years after the album released.
Yeah.
And then doing a little bit of research about it too. A little more affection for this album, I think, at this point.
Well, let's maybe start there and talk about that a little bit then, because, again, we were chit-chatting offline a little bit, I think yesterday or maybe a bit earlier today, about what a great concept to kick off a tour. Like, get the heart, hopefully you sort of attract your hardcore fans, and maybe, you could do that, something like that through your fan club where we're going to play the whole album start to finish, and then we'll give you that sort of encore set of whatever, some hits or some covers or something. But man, I'd love to see every artist do this for every album because, as that sort of really hardcore fan, I think that it's a great way to really get into the album and see that artist just perform the whole thing. Remember Foo Fighters did that when they released Wasting Light. They did a thing where they streamed a live performance from their home base, and they just played the whole thing straight through. And so that was kind of the first time we'd heard most of those songs. And I thought it was a really, really cool way of doing it. So apart from being super sick, what do you remember? Do you remember sort of being impressed? But was that your first time hearing the album, or had you actually heard it before the show?
Uh, because I don't remember exactly when the
Yeah.
album came out relative to the I'm looking it up right now. I'm trying to
Yeah,
find
I'm
the
trying to
data.
remember
Okay,
too.
released on October 8th, and the shows were on October 15th
Right.
and October 16th.
Yeah.
And it looks like to me either they recorded both shows and pieced it together, or if they recorded one show, because there were some songs. I'm looking at the encore for the second show, and that probably makes sense that they would if they recorded one show, they would record the second show,
Yeah.
just so that they had run through it. But there were more songs in the encore, and watching the film the other day, I recognized that, Shake, Rattle, and Roll and and Around were played,
Yeah.
those two covers, but they weren't in the other. And I think I ended up going to that first show on the 15th.
Okay.
So I vaguely remember this as I had listened to the album, or I gotten the album beforehand, and for this purpose of enjoying this concert, because I'm always one that does my homework before shows. I'll look at the set list and make sure
Yeah.
that usually I'm up on things, but my wife especially doesn't always know everybody's hits or album tracks or whatever. So I'll make her a playlist. If you know the songs, it's usually more enjoyable of a show to see. So I do remember, I think, listening to it beforehand, and it is a lot to listen to 12 songs of new music from an artist that you are used to hitting or hearing multiple greatest hits within the first five, six
Yeah.
songs. So it is a little bit different. And I just remember I was up in the upper level and I remember not feeling well, but I was enjoying myself.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing too, obviously, with that show is that you've got the orchestra, the little orchestra, which is that's
Yeah.
the only time really they ever played with, as my knowledge anyway, with an orchestra was those two dates. So again, just what I mean, that's a reason why maybe you don't do it all the time. It's because it becomes a bigger production. But I think how big was the Olympic? Like, is it about 2000? It's not a huge
Mhm.
venue, right? Or wasn't, I
It's
guess.
not a huge, so just, it was a former boxing venue.
Yeah.
That is how I understand it. So it's not, if you can think of what a boxing arena would look like, it's not huge.
Yeah.
I think if I remember correctly, the upper level, I mean, it was the only show I've ever seen there. They don't hold many concerts there. I don't even know what goes
Right.
on there, if it still stands,
It's a church now.
honestly.
It's a church now.
Uh, is it?
Yeah.
So the upper level is fairly close. It's not a theater. It's bigger than a theater, but it's the upper level is pretty close to the stage.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's do some quick housekeeping. We'll do the facts that we usually give out. So, yeah, October 8th, as you said, released in 2002, was recorded between 2001 and 2002 at Cello Studio in Hollywood. 47 minutes, just 47 and a half minutes overall, and produced by Tom Petty, Mike Campbell, and George Drakoulias. So, Rick Rubin leaves. Rick's number two. George comes in and it charted at number 9 on the Billboard. So it actually charted higher than Echo, even though this one didn't end up being certified by the RIAA. So I thought that was interesting in of itself that it still charted top 10.
Yeah, and it didn't like do particular. I was looking at the sales numbers on it, and it didn't go gold.
Yeah,
Apparently, it was his first one. Um, I think to that point that
right.
didn't go gold. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I remember it coming out and there just being a lot of conversation about uh, the music industry aspect of it,
Right.
and a lot of the discussion was about how he was kind of an angry old man or a bitter old man and complaining about the industry. And a
Yeah.
lot of this things, a lot of this stuff had been going on, and that doesn't mean that it doesn't need to be discussed or that it's a problem. So, um, I just think it was a departure from what his usual albums are like. And that was something that was maybe, uh, uncomfortable for some of his fans, but I
Yeah.
also I just don't think that the singles, on this album are to the same radio friendliness as previous albums. So just maybe those three or four hit songs that would normally get somebody to go out there and buy an album of
Yeah.
his that's maybe a casual fan instead of a diehard. Those just weren't present, and that's kind of comes along with it being a concept album.
Well, and I think too, when you look at, what else was in the chart, because it's always worth taking a look at what else was in the chart. I mean, I was looking through, and in the Billboard list of, every album that hit number one that year, there were only four bands that hit number one. So this is already in that era where bands, and especially rock bands, they're not really hitting the charts, right? So Creed, that album Weathered, was at number one for 4 weeks. No, I'm talking about Creed. Dave Matthews Band was number one for 1 week. Dixie Chicks was number one for 3 weeks, and then Santana with Shaman hit number one for 1 week, and then it was Eminem, Shania Twain, and then a whole bunch of rap, hip hop, R&B, pop, all that kind of stuff, right? So just the musical, and ironically, with what the subject matter of the album is, the musical landscape has just changed so that an old rock and roll band, I sort of get it why it wouldn't be as chart friendly, but again, then we have to separate out commercial success versus artistic success, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting that it was higher than Echo. Uh, it peaked, I guess, peaked higher than Echo
Hmm.
at 9, right? And then higher than Into the Great Wide Open, as well,
Yep.
13. So that's, I mean, his solo, all of his solo albums peaked higher. But I mean, I think you can see why this didn't necessarily sell as well as his previous ones. I mean, I think the concept album of it
Yeah.
and the press around that kind of dissuaded people. And then again, I think the singles just weren't, there weren't too many of them. Last EJ
For
was
sure.
radio friendly, but it was also kind of complaining about the music industry. So,
Yeah.
I don't know how many DJs wanted to play it. I don't know.
It's funny though, right? Because I think when you look at that and you sort of examine that, the DJs themselves should sort of been would have been on board with that. I think most of them, right? Because he's not complaining about radio en masse, and he's not complaining about DJs en masse. He's talking about the that homogenization that comes from corporate influence, which the DJs hated just as much as the artists would have done, right? So you get stuck in that position where the business, the company could have said, yeah, you're not playing that, don't play that record because that's not the message
Yeah.
that we want to send out. So that again, that ironically, and I'm sure Tom knew that anyway, right? He knew that that was a calculation that I know that what I'm saying is going to piss off the suits, but I still feel that artistically, this is a statement that I do need to make at this stage of my career. So I think, again, artistically for me as a 51-year-old, 52-year-old, when this comes out, I think it's a good thing that guys of that stature do stand up and sort of say, well, I think this is bullshit, and I'm going to sort of put some melody around it, some harmony around it, some groove around it, and tell you exactly why.
Yeah, and then when I said DJs wouldn't play or not, wouldn't want to, I meant the program directors and the
Yes. Yeah.
suits above them that are deciding what gets on the air and what doesn't. I'm sure the DJs, love this album.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and of course, we talk about oh good Lord, his name's gone. John, what's his name? The DJ. Good grief. Jim Ladd. Good
Jim
looking.
Ladd,
Why did
yeah,
his name? So
it was
again,
on the
was
tip of my tongue.
obviously the proponent of it, right? So
Yes.
yeah, and the other thing we were talking about, because one of the things that we do on these episodes is we do our producer for the day, and we dig into a lot of the outtakes or whatever we can find, those kind of things, and there aren't any for this album, which is the first one in a while where we've had really nothing to think about. Okay, well, do we take that out? Do we put this one in? Well, that, so I think that's interesting too, because I almost the inference there for me is like, well, Tom was very clear about what this set of songs was doing and what he wanted it to say, and so he didn't. Once he decided that, well, that doesn't fit what I'm trying to do, so let's just not bother with it. But there is one song, and we'll get into this later, maybe, that I really hope was recorded and maybe we'll find and we'll hear one day. So, all right, should we dig into some of the songs?
Yeah, let's do it.
Where do you want to start, dude?
Why don't we start with the number one hit single off of this
Absolutely.
album? I don't know if it was the number one. It was just the track number one.
Yeah.
The Last DJ peaked at 22 on the US rock chart and I
Yeah.
believe 12, yeah, on the AAA chart. So he's continuing his trend here of getting more and more on AAA radio, which makes sense as he ages and his fan
Yeah.
base ages. This has 9.5 million streams. I think that puts it, if I remember correctly, somewhere in the number 22 of the most streamed Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers
Okay.
songs. So it's not separated out with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. So, it's there with like Swingin' and Rebels and Jammin' Me and anything that's rock and roll, Woman in Love, It's Not Me. So, not a huge hit for him, but
Yeah.
decent one for him. I like the track, and I think it's a good way to start the album. And it's obviously named after the track or vice versa, or the album is named
Yeah.
after the track or vice versa. And it sort of sets you up for what you're in for. I mean, it's definitely, we're jumping right in to because there
Yeah.
are some, and I'd be interested to see how many of these songs do you think fit the concept of the concept album.
Right.
He was careful in the Conversations book to say that this was he wanted it to be a loose concept album.
Yeah.
So, as I dig into it now, I'm like, well, this one doesn't really fit the concept. And if you're going to do a concept album, I would have, I guess, guessed, preferred you to do a complete concept album. But
Right.
that's probably a lot of subject matter to tackle and to try to fit musically within your album, to make it different. I know they did cut a song about Maggie,
Yeah.
that is referred to later, that maybe could have, you mentioned that there weren't any B-sides. We don't have anything that's been released that we know of,
Hmm.
other than a Clubhouse version of You and Me, which we can get to. But this is a good way to start it. And it's interesting, if you look at the streaming on this whole album, this is by far the most streamed song, 9.5 million. The next highest is Dreamville at 1.5, and all the rest of the songs on Spotify are under 1 million streams, which is
Yeah.
pretty curious for a man or an album from this guy, Tom
Yeah,
Petty.
and again, I mean, as we'll get into probably as we start wrapping things up, an album that I think is absolutely just top tier Petty for me. But the other thing I was going to say too is I think it's the second album in his catalog that opens with the title song. So where the opening song matches the title of the album, which again, like you said, I think that's because it's such a firm statement. And he's setting out his thesis. I mean, the opening line is, well, you can't turn him into a company man, you can't turn him into a whore. I was like, well, there's no ambiguity about that line, right? And that's him telling you exactly what this is going to be. And that's where we're going to get into. And I know that, you're not the only one who we were talking again on offline a little bit about I don't know, the confrontational nature of some of these songs and not always being your favorite Petty thing. And I think that's where it falls for a lot of people. But to me, yeah, I mean, Last DJ, I love the bridge in it where we don't get a guitar solo. Instead, you get that radio static and you get that sort of spoken word thing, and you can't quite make out what they're saying until we get that last little line in there. So to me, I think it's that continued evolution of I'm going to try not to do the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah, I think we probably should maybe talk about these first four tracks
Sure.
together. I think they all fit this concept that he's going, Dreamville probably the least so, but still you can, he's talking about, going down to the music store. Is it
Yep.
Lillian's music store? And he maybe more talking about what music means to him or part of his, his upbringing or whatever. But Money Becomes King, Dreamville, and then Joe. And when I think of this album and have mixed feelings about it, it's not so much Last DJ, Money Becomes King, or Dreamville. I mean, Money Becomes King is kind of a long list of complaints, and or at least identifying some problems.
Yeah.
I would say Dreamville is a fantastic song. Tom said that uh, it was one of the best songs that he ever wrote. I love the strings in it. I think
Yeah.
those are great. Just a great album track, 1.5 million streams. Obviously, the fan base picked this one as their second favorite as well. Joe, it just doesn't ring with me. I mean, I understand
Right.
what he's going for. I don't like listening to it. It's not like a pleasure to my ears. I mean, there is some good rock guitar to it.
Yep.
But about that, he goes, if I'm perceived as bitter, so be it. Maybe I am. And then he says, I'm not bitter. It's hope, it's a hopeful album.
Yeah.
And I'm not getting a lot of that until the very, very end of the album. So you're sitting here listening to this and you're like, oh, geez, what's going on with Tom? Like, is he all right?
Yeah. I think though, one of the things that after I did the episode for it, and as I've been thinking more about it, the one thing I really like about Joe is that it doesn't really, it's not Tom saying, he doesn't get like super preachy about it. He just presents the CEO and says, this is what the industry's actually like. So don't kid yourselves. This is what's going on. He's not saying, oh, that's really bad, or I think that we should do, you know what I mean? He doesn't give you any prescription for it. He just says, this is the way it is. And I kind of like that aspect of it, that it's just like, this is the truth. I'm just going to give you the truth. Do with it whatever the hell you like. And like I said on the episode, I think that song's crucial because you can't really have that redemption later on when you get, Have Love Will Travel and You and Me and those songs, if you don't have the villain of the piece. And I think Joe's a pretty flipping good villain on a concept album. So
Yeah, I mean, I think it's necessary.
yeah, you just don't
And
like it.
I just am not like it's a song that I listen to, and I'm not crazy about it. So that's
Yeah.
just the way this is the way it goes. I mean, if you're gonna listen to the album and listen to it as a concept album, not just as a collection of songs, then you need to listen to Joe because that's as you mentioned, he's the primary villain. But Tom talked about it in the book that a lot of the stuff that he was complaining about just manufactured pop stars.
Yeah.
He said it's going back to the way things were in the 60s when they were doing that same thing, where they were sort of manufacturing pop stars and they didn't really have much talent, but whatever. So
Yeah.
it's been around a while, like just trying to fit a market with a pretty
Yes.
face, male or female, and talent, not necessarily
Yeah.
necessary. So it is something that the old man yelling at cloud kind of vibe to it, but these are valid
Yeah.
complaints.
It's kind of funny too when you think about what you just said there. Elvis Presley never wrote a song. You know what I mean? And Elvis Presley was very much molded and steered and managed and handled. And look, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna say that, Elvis Presley was just a plastic pop star, because obviously he did have talent and he was a musician, he did play and all those kinds of things. But there is definitely only a degree of separation between that and I don't know, take someone like a Bieber or someone like that, where there really is just a generational difference, and because the music's so different. But if Bieber had come up in the 60s or 50s and Colonel Tom had found him, probably would have been roughly the same path they would have taken. And if Elvis came through now, probably would have been through YouTube. You know what I mean? So there definitely are those parallels. So I get that, but I still, the angry old man shouting at clouds in me sort of agrees that, I want people on these TV shows with talent. I want to see them play their instruments. I want to hear them sing their own songs. It's not so they just end up being karaoke contest. Anyway, I wanted to,
Well, that's totally valid, and that's your right to want that. And
of
then
course,
there's a whole subsection of the market that doesn't care if they write their own songs or even
yeah,
play their own songs. They
much,
just
much bigger
like the
segment.
way, yeah. And I want to go back to "Money Becomes King" just briefly because I'm looking at the lyrics, and it's just it's valid. I mean, this is obviously part of the concept of this album.
Yeah,
But just talking about the VIPs and the people sitting close to the stage, and that has only gotten worse
yeah,
since 2002. How and I think to a certain extent, artists have cashed in on that aspect of it by selling VIP tickets. I mean, it used to be that these seats would go immediately, no matter well, if you price them too high. But there was just no, there was too much backlash, I think, for artists to price them too high. But then they would get purchased by scalpers or fall into scalpers' hands, and then they would sell for even more.
yeah,
So now artists see that scalpers are having a whole living off of their music and their concerts, and so they start to raise the prices of their and create these VIP things. So now I'm noticing when I do go to a show or I'm looking at this that these VIP prices are insane and just higher than anything that I would pay for anything at this point in
yeah,
my life, unless there's maybe a you know sound check concert that you have access to ahead of time, and you maybe a meet and greet or something that
yes,
might pull for a smaller band that I really love. Like that might entice me, but for one of the larger bands when they're asking $1,000 or $1,500 a seat for something like that,
yeah,
it has gotten, and I think in the age of streaming, this is how they have to make their living too, is by
yeah,
going around and touring. And this is why a lot of these nostalgia acts are still going around and touring because this is how they are making money, and they're making generational money for their family. So
yeah,
that's just a long way of saying that Money Becomes King is probably very prophetic because it just, he was always good about keeping the prices at or below the average for what his type of level of band was doing.
yeah,
And he also did a very good job. And I wanted to reiterate this again. I know I've said this on the podcast before, but with his fan club, which I think was $30 or $50 a year, and he's touring every year, you're getting access to tickets within the first 10, 15, 20 rows at the
right,
worst. If you know what you're doing, you're sitting in the first 10 rows for a reasonable price for
yeah,
much of my Tom Petty going career. And I've probably seen him 15 times. So I had some second row seats. I ended up in the first row on one show, and it was great. And the worst, I think once I joined the fan club, the worst seat I had, I think, was 18th row.
yeah,
So, and for a reasonable price, they weren't jacked up. I think the most I paid for a Petty ticket was $125 or something, and that was the last tour, I think. So
yeah,
I say all that to say this is that he is a he believed that this album would outlast him, and I think it has. And for you to name it one of your top Petty albums, I think speaks to that. And it is something like this, Money Becomes King, very prophetic in terms of where it has headed. And I think streaming has even exacerbated the ticket price issue.
problem, yeah,
And it's to the point now where there are really, really, really rich people that just buy these tickets just to sit by the stage, and they're not even that big of fans necessarily of the artist. They just have a lot of money, and it's a status issue for them.
yeah,
Some people are saving up and you know giving their whole life savings to go to one of these shows and sit up there. But I think that's more the exception rather than the rule.
absolutely. Okay, well, let's get back into positive then, because you mentioned Dreamville being the second most streamed song. And I got to tell you, because I was down in Gainesville this past November, and walking from Tom's house to Lillian's music store was this weirdly profound thing. And I'm not given to those I'm not I don't tend to be like that. Oh, that's where such and such grew up. But that for some reason that walk from Tom's house to because there's only like probably two or three routes you'd ever really take, and I know that the layout of that city hasn't really changed that much. So I know that I was walking probably the way that Tom walked down, down through the park and then out through back down into the downtown sort of area. And there was something about it that just sort of because Gainesville does still feel like quite a small town, the one story town, it's got that sense of you sort of feel like, yeah, this is probably what he saw. This is what he was looking at. And there is something about that as a Petty fan that was super, super cool. And of course, I listened to Dreamville as I was walking that route, and there was something very, very cool about it. And I think that when you live away from home, I think that you get that. So I don't know that if people who've never lived away from home for any length of time, I don't know if you have that same sense of that nostalgic yearning for a place that actually doesn't even exist anymore, but in your memory it's still there. So I wanted to ask you about that. Obviously, you don't live where you were born. Do you still have when you go back home to your hometown? Is that sort of do you have those sort of fond reminiscences, or is it now been so long that you just think, I don't really recognize this place anymore?
Yeah, I go back pretty infrequently now, and I think the thing that gives me the most nostalgia is probably driving past my high school, and there's a
Right.
custard stand called Leduc's uh, in in Wales. I guess it's Wales, Wisconsin. That's where Killamarian High School is. That's where I went.
Okay.
Um, and I do like that specific place. Leduc's was always the place we would hit sometimes after school, sometimes after games,
Right.
grab a custard, maybe a burger if you're hungry, and just a great place to hang out. Yeah, I think to that, I see where this specific song, if you are actually walking that route and you actually hosted a Tom Petty podcast, that this would be it'd be very meaningful
Yeah.
to you. And I think Dreamville is one of the best songs on the album, and I think it's one of the best, certainly in this first group of concept songs on the
Yep.
album. So yeah, I think the strings were just fantastic, and I like the way that he tied music into the song, and I wish he would have done that a bit more in some of these other tracks that don't really fit the concept.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I've been thinking about this too, and about like, I wonder if, and obviously, we know that this is loose, like you said, and Tom said as much, and that it isn't a fully cohesive concept record, but I'm wondering if there's a way to sort of thread it all together after the fact, and find ways to sort of thread it all together. Because I mean, when a kid goes bad, I'd sort of suggested on the episode when I did that you could sort of tie that into, that commercialization and cheating of culture and the commodification of youth that we get through corporations, you could sort of tie that in. So you could say that the fifth track does sort of follow roughly some of that concept. I think when you get to Like a Diamond and Lost Children, that's where it really diverges. And for me, I remember coming into this season, I was looking at this and I thought, first five songs I love, last five songs I love. I think it's going to be the middle, that pivot, Like a Diamond and Lost Children. That's maybe where my scores are going to be a bit lower. But the more I listened to the album and the more I kind of got into those songs, the more I sort of fell in love with them too. And Like a Diamond, it's one of those that sort of I just never really listened to it, but it's got that quality to it for me that is it as good as I don't know, most things I worry about never happen anyway. No, it's not got that line in it. Does it have a dramatic weight like It's Good to Be King? No, it doesn't, but it's still got that really cool deep cut sense to it that I think, yeah, I mean, I've heard Money Becomes King a million times. I've listened to Joe a million times, Last DJ a million times. Have Love Will Travel I've listened to a billion times. When you come back and you think, oh, yeah, I think I've rediscovered Like a Diamond, and it is a little bit of a diamond in the rough there.
And I fully agree because this is the one that listening to this album, I don't know, 10 times over the last weekend, and the Like a Diamond really grew on me. It's not one that I had put on any playlist really. I don't
Yeah,
think, and I think I'm going to add it now to my deep cuts, playlist. That's I like to, tracks that you don't hear on the radio at all, and it's just nice to hear them. They're good. They're good, really good album tracks. He's got quite a few of those, right?
yeah,
So when a kid goes bad, you touched on it. Not like one that really jumps out to me. I don't know how this fits the concept really, but you made a case for it. Like that I think that was a reasonable case if you're trying to make this work.
yeah, yeah,
I think musically it's pretty solid, but not anything that really stands out to me too much. But I think like when I get to like a diamond, and maybe the fifth time I heard it in the last few days, I was like, this is
Yeah.
and this always happens when I do this with you,
Yeah.
is there's always at least one track that pops up.
Yeah.
Because the ones I knew I would like, or knew that I've liked them a long time. Like, so I immediately identified the stuff that I liked. It was Dreamville, and a few that are coming up. But this Like a Diamond one is kind of a sleeper.
Yeah. What about Lost Children then? Because again, that was another one for me that, you know, I love it as part of the album, but again, it was one of those I'm not too sure I'd ever. If I was thinking, hey, I want to listen to a Tom Petty song, I'm not too sure Lost Children would ever be the song. But then when it comes on, I'm always like, God damn, that's a good riff, man. That's such a cool riff, and it's got that great bridge section in the middle. I'm like, musically, everything about this speaks to me because it's interesting. It's all perfectly, immaculately executed. Is it a great song? I don't know if I can make that argument, but I still love it.
Yeah, I don't like I know it's about lost children. I don't know how this fits,
Yeah,
and I don't necessarily want to listen to a song about missing, I guess that's missing children, or just lost like I don't know, like
yeah.
they're not being parented, or whatever's going on. They're filled with hunger and pain. I mean, this is just not subject matter that is something that I want to inject into my life, unless I'm really feeling morbid, and want to, be, listen to slow and sad songs. But this
Yeah.
is like musically, and I think there's still, and I should say this, is that even though the concept's kind of hit or miss for me, they are musically still right there with Echo and
Yeah.
She's the One and Wildflowers and stuff. The sound that this is the sort of the sound that he settled on at at Wildflowers, and it's been like that's how it kind of carried him through the rest of his
Yeah.
career. And George Drakoulias was the producer on this one as
Yep.
well, so like kind of carrying that over from the Wildflower days as well. So musically, they're really really solid. I don't think there's a lot of hits,
Yeah.
or catchy things that would bend the ear of somebody on the radio, but a lot of great music here.
It's funny you mentioned too, because one thing that I clued in on during this season that I don't know if it was deliberate, and I'd love to talk to George Drakoulias, obviously, but on Wildflowers, She's the One, Echo, there's a lot of very deliberate panning that they use to separate sound out and to give you sort of width in the arrangements. And there's really not on this album. A lot of it's mixed pretty much down the middle where you don't get that separation of the two guitars on left and right. And I kind of would love to ask, was that deliberate so that it ties into sort of that, that looking back and that wistfulness for a time when everything was better, quote unquote, the money becomes king thing. And so when, if you used to listen to the radio, a lot of it was in mono, and records were released in mono in the 50s and 60s. So it's not mono, it is still stereo, but I wonder if they were doing that to deliberately get that very specific kind of sound, because it's still got the cleanness that you'd expect from Rick Rubin, and George was involved in those albums. But just the mix of it, I find really interesting that they made that decision, because it's got to be deliberate to do it. So I'd love to ask about that. So
Put it on your list of questions to ask him
oh,
once
I
you
got a
get him on the podcast.
million of them. Okay, let's talk about Blue Sunday, because this was one. This is the one for me that was the sort of the sea change song on this album and just grabbed me. And I don't know if you listened to that episode, but I ended up with this whole story that just sort of came in as I was driving around, listening to it on repeat, and this whole world just opened up, and I was like, well, that was unexpected. So it got a 10 out of 10 for me just because that song's become very meaningful to me in terms of just my own creative wheels spinning up in my head.
Yeah, I this is one that immediately, when I listened to this album back in 2002,
Yeah.
uh, I immediately liked it. Like just the story. I like it when he gets into his storytelling bag and starts to create characters, and this is poetry to me.
Yes.
I'm looking at the lyrics right now, and her backseat could have been a hotel. I slept for 1,000 years. Every now and then she'd laugh out loud for no reason. I
Yeah.
pretended not to hear. It sounds like they're trying to stay ahead of her daddy's bloodhounds,
Yeah.
but he's not worried about that right now. This is one where all it would have taken, perhaps, is a line about a song on the radio, or listening to the music on the radio, or something, some sort of musical soundtrack to this, where you could now tie it into.
Right.
I mean, I think it fits just because of how good it is and sort of the scene he's setting, because there's music playing, but they don't ever really, he doesn't ever really explicitly say it.
Yeah.
So I love this track. I mean, this is one of those great petty deep cuts for me, and I get a 9 out of 10. But I didn't give any 10 out of 10s on this one, so on
Right.
this album. So lots of nines or a few nines here. We'll talk about.
Yeah, and that's where you get into that thing, right? Where I think a song can be just undeniably 10 out of 10. Like American Girl is just it's just one of the great rock and roll songs all time by any artist, right? And then you got songs though that are you can have a song that it just really means something to you because you relate it to, I don't know, someone dying or someone falling in love or whatever, or it can be a special song that you met your wife to or whatever, right? And then there's just songs that feel right. And that's for me is where I ended up with a 10 out of 10. It's like this song is just deep in my bones now that I couldn't possibly give it anything other than a 10 out of 10, you know?
That's really nice to hear because this is one that I've liked for 24 years,
Yeah.
and I don't know that I've ever talked to anyone else who liked it. So,
Right.
like, I mean, it's not something that I'm not going around asking, "Hey, do you like Blue Sunday?" But like to actually have a conversation about the song that I love.
Yeah.
So that's very nice to hear.
There's lots of piano in it too, but and again, because Ben Montley's and there's a couple of songs on this album where it doesn't start with guitar, which is atypical for the Heartbreakers. Even I mean, even on a ballad, quite often it'll be the guitar that starts. So I always like it when you get just that little change up. And again, I think with Petty, another thing that we don't talk about enough is and this is going to sound so stupid and nerdy, but he was an absolute master at getting the tempo of a song right. Even just 5 beats per minute either way can really change a song. And he just always seemed to manage to find the exact sweet spot for where a song should sit. And Blue Sunday, again, is helped by just being exactly the right speed.
Yeah, and he, as a master of the mid-tempo, and that we call mid-tempo bangers on this podcast, or at least I do.
Yeah.
This is not really, it's a banger in quality. It's not really a banger, like banger banger, but
Yeah.
it, this is, he just, this is his sweet spot for me for his deep cuts and for his album tracks as these kind of slower. He probably would call them ballads,
Yeah.
but there's still some rock aspects to them. But like to me, the thing that really stands out is the storytelling here, and I wish he would do it more.
Yeah. Well, that's where, and I mean, again, when you go back to Money Becomes King, I think that's because you've got, the criticism, but it is applied through this story about that we get. And I'm completely on board with that too. When he gets into that place where he gives you the characters and he gives you enough of the staging, but there's still enough there that you don't know that you can sit and wonder about. And again, for a narrative songwriter, that's always what you want, right? Okay, last four songs, and what stands out for you? In because if you break it into four, like you said, I mean, the last DJ Money Becomes King, Dreamville and Joe, that's four songs that really do go together. Then you got the midsection, When a Kid Goes Bad Like a Diamond, Lost Children, Blue Sunday. That's your deep cuts bit of the album, and typically you do want to finish strong, and I think we do finish really strong on this album. But which of those last four stand out for you?
Yeah, this is a back half of this album I prefer to the front half of it, and
Right?
I would say that is not typically the case with a Petty album.
Yeah,
But You and Me is kind of a funny. There's a funny story, but I like this version more about it or more now after hearing the Clubhouse version, which I prefer. I prefer the Clubhouse version, and I
yeah,
just started loving the Clubhouse version, which I would like to know the story of why this was recorded many years later,
yeah.
and then released as a single or whatever, a deep cut. Um, because I do like this version now more. It didn't stand out to me really that much when I listened to the album initially. And now it's like a nice moment in the back half, which I already like the back half of this album more than the front half. So we're adding now this like different version of this song that I consider a hit now, or at least a
Yeah.
hit in my world. Uh, it is like if I were to put it on, I'm going to put on the Clubhouse version though, so that makes it a little bit awkward for playlists and stuff like that. But I think if you were to just take my favorites off of this and make an EP, which I think it works a little bit better that way, but we're also just losing the whole part of the concept of the album. So
Right.
I don't think I'm going to get into the producer of the day on this one so much, other than maybe just have a 6 or 8 playlist of it when I want to listen to this without hearing Joe. Here's
Right.
what, or I can put this EP on and kind of skip that aspect of it with
Yeah.
Joe lurking, as
In the
a
background.
in the background. Yeah,
It's funny with you and me though, and I agree. Like when you hear the Clubhouse version, you're like, that's you almost get the sense that that's how it was written. And then when they get into the studio, they develop it and they polish it and all those kinds of things. Because the clarity in the arrangement on the album version of this one, it's really got that Wildflowers thing to me. There's a sort of a lilt to it and a bounce to it, almost that shuffle from To Find a Friend. You know what I mean? It's got that kind of thing to it. So I love both versions, but I think I'm probably with you that the Clubhouse version, there's just something about that one, right? And of course, we know
It
this was Dana had written on Facebook that he wrote it just before they were married, right? So this
oh
is very clearly, an overt love song for the woman he's going to be spending the rest of his life with.
yeah, and something that has nothing to do with the concept of the album, which is
Yeah,
fine. He did make it very clear it was a loose concept album, and
very loose. Yeah,
it's me trying to make it a full concept album, which I shouldn't do. Yeah, I think also with the Clubhouse version, I don't know what if You and Me for the album version was recorded in the same way. I would assume that the Clubhouse version is them all playing at once and it sounding like
I'm
a
pretty,
live
I'm pretty sure it
recording
is.
of
Yeah,
them, whereas this is maybe a little bit more meticulous and things being laid down before, after, and during. Uh, but we always prefer the live stuff a little bit, especially when you could get a nice clean version of it. And just it's an interesting story that they recorded that later, years later, and
yeah,
put it out.
absolutely. Okay, so how big a Kinks fan are you, Mr. Paulson? How
Pretty
much do you know about?
pretty big,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Not huge, but pretty big.
did
Go
you
ahead.
get with the Man Who Loves Women? Was it like did it just the first time you heard it, you're like, well, that's just Tom, just that's Ray Davis. That's exactly what Ray Davis was doing for so many years, or not?
No, I did not think of
Right.
the Kinks. I thought of the ukulele, and I thought of George Harrison because I knew that was a big deal in his life around
Yeah.
this time. And this is one that I wrote off my initial listening to this album as just kind of a goofy
Right.
song. Listening to it, forcing myself to listen to it, another 10, 15 times. I kind of, I like it now. I think it's catchy, obviously. I just don't like it. It's again, I don't. If you could sort of paint maybe Joe as the guy that's the man who loves women, and on top of being a CEO, he's also addicted to women. Or maybe a rock star
Yeah.
who loves women. It's just kind of it. It doesn't. It's very atypical of a Petty album or Petty song. That doesn't necessarily make it bad. It just makes it unusual and takes a little getting used to, I think.
Well, I think do you not think though that it lives in that same space as something like You're So Bad, which is also, it's got that sardonic kind of a little bit sarcastic. You know what I mean? It's got that kind of thing to it where he knows there's that knowing wink back to the
Yes.
camera. You know what I mean? It's got that element to it that I think is fab.
I think that's absolutely true. What I meant more was the ukulele aspect of it,
Okay, I
and
gotcha.
like it's just unusual to hear that on a Petty
Yeah.
album. I think I absolutely agree that this is in the same vein as "You're So Bad" and what was no, it wasn't "To Find a Friend." Thinking of the Wildflowers track where he gets divorced and goes and
Oh
gets a
yeah.
car, and I'm blanking on it right now at the moment, but the same. It's the same sort of humor about, and it quite often is about men's failures
Yeah.
and weaknesses and vices. So he seems to tap into that, rather frequently.
Okay, so last two songs on this album. I think you could make a fairly solid argument that this is the best last two songs on any Heartbreakers record. I'm not saying it definitely is, but I think you could definitely make the argument. Have Love Will Travel into Can't Stop the Sun, and Have Love Will Travel, of course, has the line that every Petty fan loves. How about a cheer for all those bad girls and all the boys that play that rock and roll. It is a great line.
I would say that my first listen of this album, I remember vaguely, and I remember saying thank God for those last two songs on the album. I absolutely agree. These both get nines or tens. I mean, within the scope of the album, these get tens. But I immediately gravitated towards "Have Love Will Travel." I think it's up there, with "It's Good to Be King" and those types, and "Room at the Top."
Yeah.
I think same kind of vibe, and he minds this type of song so well, especially at this point in his career. And these two also, I would say, do fit the concept of the album.
Yeah.
And I think so if you look at the track listing, it's very much front loaded with some music industry stuff. and then he goes away from it for a while and then comes back to it towards the end, I think is what he was going for. Um, and then I think he's just kind of, there's a sandwich and there's meat in the sandwich in the middle. This is the bread, I guess. I don't know. The But the lyrics, how about a cheer for all those bad girls, which would always get when he played this in concert, would always get a cheer. And the boys that play rock and roll, they love it like you love Jesus. It does the same thing to their souls. And I think
Yeah,
that's a very great way of describing what music means to a lot of people. That it is almost a religious experience. And I think for Tom it was. And I think this is almost a love letter to rock music in general.
yeah.
And musically, it's just phenomenal. It's one of his best songs he's ever written.
Couldn't agree. But I don't even need to say anything. You've said it all. Yeah, no, well, I will say something because it's making you know what I'm like. But I think it is one of those songs too, though, that, like you said, I mean, it was released as the second single. And of course, it is again, you're in that, we talk about that mid-tempo range where it's not going to grab people and go, holy shit, what is this? It's not like Refugee and but it's also not, I don't know, Wildflowers. It kind of sits in between where it's a brilliant song, but I sort of see how it gets missed. But then when you listen to it, as any sort of music fan or rock and roll fan, how could you not love this track? It's, as you said, I think it is in that argument for the best 10, 20 songs he wrote, for sure. Lyrically, musically, everything about it.
Yeah, and as you look back at this album, and I mentioned it earlier, but a lot of great music on it, lacking a monster hit,
Yeah.
or two or three or 10, as some of his albums have.
Yeah.
And that's sort of why it goes under the radar, or it is going under the radar, or it has gone under the radar. I just don't think people are pulling it out here. Oh, I want to listen to the last DJ, so I'm going to listen to, I'm going to pull out the CD and listen to it, listen to the whole album out of it. And
Yeah.
um, but then you miss some of this stuff. I don't know, like I don't know how many. I would say the diehards would have listened to these tracks a lot. I wonder, like the middling greatest hits fan, the guy that
Right.
maybe has a guy or girl who maybe has half of his albums, or the greatest hits plus a couple other ones, or maybe pick this one up. How deep and how often did they get into because this stuff is buried
Yeah.
at the end of the concept album, and they're probably the two best, or two of the four best songs on the album. I will say that. It's unusual, but he had a reason for this. I mean, he wanted these. He was very happy with how the album ended.
Yeah.
And then we get into "Can't Stop the Sun," which he said is mostly Mike's song. He did change a lot of the lyrics, he said, but the music was mostly there. And he wanted to end it on a hopeful. And it is kind of hard, though, to be kind of upset, angry, bitter, griping for a good portion of the album, and then just throw on "Can't Stop the Sun," which basically says you're not going to kill us. We're gonna
Yeah. It's that
we're gonna be
defiance.
we're gonna
Yeah.
be around. Somebody's gonna replace me.
Yeah.
Somebody's gonna keep fighting the good fight, and fighting for what's right or what's true.
Yeah.
And then call it hopeful. I mean, I don't know if the album's hopeful, but the song certainly is. It's a great track.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we talk about it. If we take the central thesis of the concept part of the album as being that sort of frustration with, or, disillusionment with the industry itself, I don't think all of it is, I mean, there are still those flashes coming through. I mean, I don't know, like a Diamond, Dreamville, You and Me, Blue Sun. These are hopeful songs, and certainly they are melodically hopeful. And and I think that's why ending with this one, and it's a long outro on this song 'cause it's a 5 minute song, and the last 2 minutes is really just that sort of big crescendo vamp up. You got the orchestra, and then Mike going to town. I think that's just brilliant in terms of, when we talk about producing, and we have resequenced a lot of Tom's albums, much to the chagrin of some of our listeners, but that's okay. But I think that it's really the only way you can in this album, because you go out on that big, and I'm sure when you're there, that moment, when you see that song live, it's like, oh yeah, man, that's what I'm here for.
Yeah, I was definitely looking forward to, Blue Sunday. I was definitely looking forward to the back half of it. I mean, I love
Yeah,
Dreamville, obviously, but then getting into Blue Sunday, Have Level Travel, Can't Stop the Sun, all in the last whatever 5 or 6 tracks. Definitely was looking forward to that portion of the concert. And you made a good point. Yes, there are the songs. What I'm saying that doesn't sound hopeful is the concept
Yeah,
portion of it
of course.
until really the end. Um, because yes, the tracks in the middle there are some love songs and stuff in there that do sound absolutely hopeful. Good point.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, I mean, let's let's wrap things up because I want to talk about one thing that I found interesting about this conversation. I kind of figured this was probably the way it would go, and we're talking about, there aren't really hits on this, and there aren't, because there wasn't anything that really charted really well, and I don't think there's anything on this album that you'll ever hear on the radio now. If you're on an AOR, they might play Have Love Will Travel once every 3,000 spins or something. If it's a petty fan who's a DJ and gets it in and sneaks it in there as his, the one of the two tracks a year he's allowed to bring in, you might get that. But you're not going to hear any of this stuff. But because I'm not really, and certainly not in the last 3 to 4 years, 5 years, I'm not really a playlist slash shuffle listener anymore. And of course, you see me post on Facebook interminably that I listen to albums, I listen to vinyl. As an album, for me, this one it's just, it's so cohesive and it flows so well, and it brings you up and takes you down in all exactly the right spaces as 12 songs together. That's why I think I love this album so much. It's one that I go back to. I think this one, Wildflowers, and Long After Dark, probably over the last 2 years, those have been the three albums that I listen to more than Full Moon Fever, more than Damn the Torpedoes, any of those other albums, right?
It's interesting that you say that. I would not have it that high in his discography just for the reasons I've mentioned.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that there's not fantastic music on here at all. Like, that's not what I'm saying. I do not want to hear Joe. The the Last DJ is the biggest hit on this album by far, and it's not like one of my favorite hits of his.
Yeah.
Um, they did release. I was just looking at the singles. They did release Have Level Travel as a
Yeah.
single, did not chart. I'm sure you mentioned that on the podcast. You and Me was also released as a single and didn't chart. So it's interesting that those didn't even on like a AAA
Yeah.
or like Have Level Travel maybe on the rock, adult rock or whatever. Like
You
it's
would think
interesting
so,
that
wouldn't you?
those didn't chart whatsoever. Should have. These are some nice songs and they're on the back half of the album.
Okay, well, so what would be your three-song EP then? I'm pretty sure I can guess them, but I'm gonna let you go because I think
Yeah.
that I don't think we've ever had where we both pick the same three, and I think possibly slash probably I think we probably have on this one. So although having said that, I don't know now. I'm not too sure.
Yeah, so I was gonna say this was easy, and then I ended up with four, and I'm sitting here staring at the list, and I don't know. Like I was gonna do some gamesmanship here because I
Okay.
would think that you might pick Dreamville, so I was going to pick Have Level Travel, Can't Stop the Sun, and Blue Sunday
Okay.
because those are my three favorite. But I also really, really like Dreamville, and I know Tom thought it was one of the greatest songs he's ever written.
Yeah.
So, like to me, those four songs sum up the highlights. Uh, of the album. Like if you were to try to sell this album to somebody that's a casual petty fan, say, "Oh, just listen to these four songs over and over and over again and see if you all of a sudden love them."
Yeah.
And now then go and listen to the album and see if there's anything else you like. That's sort of the route I would take with this. But yeah, so I'm gonna go with Hello Travel, Can't Stop the Sun, Blue Sunday, hoping that you pick Dreamville.
Well, so I didn't pick Dreamville. Um, I did pick The Last DJ because, again, for me, I love that song. I love the middle section of it. I think the bounce of it's cool. I like the lyrics. I like the big stops. Dum dum. Here goes the I like that bit of it. So musically and the arrangement of it, I love. And then I went, of course. Look, Have Love Will Travel's got to be on your list, and Can't Stop the Sun has to be on your list. I just there's no way around those. So then I got stuck with, okay, well, but The Last DJ, but I love Blue Sunday so much that I ended up I still got it written down as Have Love Will Travel slash Blue Sunday because I just couldn't decide. So how about we go then? If we say let's compromise and say we'll do six. We'll say The Last DJ.
Yeah, I was gonna say 6 or 5 because you could do Last DJ, Have Level Travel, Can't Stop the Sun, Blue Sunday, and Dreamville. What
There
would
we
be your
go.
sixth? What would be your sixth then?
Well, that would be it, wouldn't it? Last DJ, Have Love Will Travel, Blue Sunday, Can't Stop the Sun,
That's
Have
5.
Love
And
Will
Dreamville.
Travel, and Dreamville. Hang on,
Isn't that 5?
let me cut. I'm going to cut. Maybe we've got five then, have we? Yeah, we got five then. So last
Then
DJ
I
Have Love
might,
Will Travel, Can't Stop the Sun, Blue Sunday, Dreamville.
and I'm fine with that. And if you wanted to put in You and Me, but I kind of like the Clubhouse version better.
Well, let's say this is a good. Let's say this is the representative, the definitively representative EP for the last DJ that will give someone say, look, listen to these five songs. If you like these five songs, you'll probably like the album, even though
So,
Joe
what
might be
order
a bit
would
of a
you put
challenge.
them in then? What order?
Well, you okay? Well, you got to start with the last DJ, and you got to finish with "Can't Stop the Sun," right?
Yes. And
Those
I
are the
would say,
bookends.
and I would put Have Love with, could you put Blue Sunday second or third and then Dreamville second or
Second,
third?
maybe you go last DJ, Dreamville, Blue Sunday, and then finish "Have Love Will Travel," "Can't Stop the Sun," because we already said it's a great one-two punch to close, right?
And that's the order that they appear on the album as well.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm fine. I'll allow that, and I am fine with that.
Okay, so we did talk about produce for the day, but obviously we're not going to get into it. This is the first time in a long time. We're really not going to spend any substantive time on this. In terms of, and again, we've talked about you not a huge fan of Joe. I wouldn't touch a note on this album in terms of sequencing. If we had the Maggie song, I'd love to know where they would have put that one in because it would have to come before Have Love Will Travel somewhere. But I'm wondering if they would break up that sort of middle two, three, those fulcrum songs. So I'm kind of curious where that would be sequenced. But what I wanted to sort of close maybe with here is so through the podcast, obviously I rate each song out of 10. And I know that, people raise their eyebrows at me all the time. You give that a 10 or you only give that a 7 or whatever. But at the end of a season, then I end up with an average, right? So I end up with an average rating out of 10. And I'm curious whether you can guess what my top five are right now. What are the top five? Just on the average ratings that I've given the songs on the show.
What the top five albums
Yeah.
are? Well, I know you love, I'm surprised you didn't mention it. I know you love Hard Promises.
Mm-hmm.
So it's on the top five.
So is that one of your guesses?
Yeah.
Okay, that's one of your guesses. I promises.
Well,
Kim comes in at number five.
okay. So you Long After Dark? Because you mentioned that.
Isn't in there.
Is it
Weirdly,
in there?
I don't know
Okay.
why. So I think the thing with Long After Dark is I think there are a couple of songs that I still love, but they are very definitely just album tracks and not super super strong. And it's
Okay.
also not got those two or three 10 out of 10s. It's just one of those
Okay.
where everything's in that 8, 9 range for me, not quite in that upper range. So, do
All right. Well, Last DJ is in the top five, right?
you know what position?
One.
Number two.
Number two.
Yeah, number two. Yeah.
Wildflowers got to be number one. I know
Wildflowers
you
is
love
number
that
one.
one.
Yeah. You
So we
got
got
three out
one,
of
two, and
three out of
five.
five so far. You're doing great here.
Um, and I don't know where you finally landed on Full Moon Fever.
Okay.
It should be in your top five. Echo.
Echo's in at number seven. Full Moon Fever's number six.
Okay.
That should give you should from there be able to get it, I think.
Oh, I think you really like Into the Great Wide Open.
I certainly do. That's number
Okay.
four.
Four. Okay. And so then three. No,
Yeah, number three. Yeah, that's
three
the only one you got
would
left.
be number three. Damn the Torpedoes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I knew it wasn't
Wildflowers,
Southern. I knew it wasn't Southern accents.
no, such highs on Southern accents and then such what? Why have you done? What is going on here? You know what I mean? If ever an album cried out for like a parallel EP release with all the Dave Stewart stuff on it, that's fine. Just
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
For sure.
9.13 for Wildflowers, 9.08 for Last DJ, 8.78 Damn the Torpedoes, 8.55 for Into the Great Wide Open, and 8.5 for Hard Promises. Full Moon Fever, 8.45. So that gap between 4, 5, and 6 is real close. And then Echoes, 8.07. And that's then we get into the 7 point whatevers. So, yeah.
Are you gonna go back at any point, re-listen to the albums, and then adjust your scores?
I think it would be interesting to do and maybe this is something me and you can do. We can get on once we've sort of done the 16 canonical albums. We'll say, oh, let's rank them. And I know that it's sort of a futile exercise. It's art, and it's going to measure, and it'll cause all sorts of debate. But it would be interesting to see how far apart we would be on. I'm sure that because I'm sure Full Moon Fever, Damn the Torpedoes are going to be, and Wildflowers obviously will be. I think probably would be your top three, and then so it'll be interesting to see where else we go after that. So
Well, I don't. Damn the Torpedoes was, I wouldn't say before my time, but I got into it well
yeah,
after it was released. And I don't know. I don't think it'd be my top three.
okay. See, the other thing about Damn the Torpedoes is it's only 9 songs. So when you get into albums that have got 15,
Yeah.
you're automatically it's harder to get into those upper levels because you're just dealing with so many more songs that I don't know, man. You can get those a couple 2 or 3 sevens can really pull that average right back down, right?
And one final note on this with the Maggie song, which he did mention by
Yeah.
name. I don't think it was called Maggie necessarily, but there's a character Maggie that was introduced in a song. What he said in that quote was very interesting, and I don't think that there is enough of a groundswell of demand or clamor for a extended release. The Last
Yeah.
DJ album. I mean, you'd have to
I
spearhead
want
that
one.
now that you're the guy. But he did say, I kind of overwrote that album. I wrote several things
Yeah.
that didn't make the cut. And then he was talking about the song Introduce Maggie from Have Love Will Travel. So that I thought that was a very interesting
Hmm.
statement because we have seen nothing other than the Clubhouse version of You and Me, which was just another version of that song that came out,
Yeah.
and they've been doing interesting things where they just release a random single here and there. And I wonder what's up their sleeve, if anything, from the last DJ sessions.
Yeah. And it comes back to something I was talking about earlier, John, that I wonder whether, because we know that Tom, for the most part, demoed songs. He had them all sort of ready to go, and then he would bring them in, playing them for the guys, and they'd all figure out their parts and improve them and tweak them and tune them and all that kind of stuff. But I wonder whether and so then we record a lot of them and then decide what was on the album. But I wonder with this set, then I wonder if it was that case of okay, well I've got all these songs, let's find the 12 that we're going to do. You know what I mean? And so like work through them and play them live, maybe rehearse them and record, you know, more polished but still demos and just say, okay, well, yeah, these are the 12 that actually tell the story that I want, or these are the 12 that I think fit together. So let's actually just spend all our time getting those 12 absolutely as good as we can. And let's do it that way, which would be a different way than they usually do it, and different again from the way that both Highway Companion and Mojo comes about, and Hypnotic Eye for that matter. So I wonder if that plays into it. That it's just like, okay, well, we just changed our process and we're just going to really focus on this.
I think that's certainly possible. The interesting thing to me is that this was a song that fit within the concept of the concept album, and then
Yep.
they decided not to use it. So I wonder what was the decision basis behind all that.
Well, and we've talked about this lots on previous episodes too. I think Tom did have a good barometer though for, when he's got 16 songs and he only needs 13, he tends to pick the right 13. You know what I mean? Like he had that. I mean, there's a few examples where we've sort of said, well, I think that should definitely be on the album. But more often than not, I think he got it right for the most part.
Well, he's a master at sequencing his albums,
Yeah.
and he ultimately is the decider. But I made a face when you were saying that he, always got it right. Like that playback box set has a whole disc of
Yeah.
called Nobody's Children, which is outstanding songs that didn't make some of these
Yeah.
albums that definitely had a few weak spots. So there was some blind spots, I think, in the middle of his career there, where he left some really good songs off those
Yeah.
albums.
I mean, Keeping Me Alive would be the one that I would certainly say, that one should have been on Long After Dark, definitely. There are a few, but I think overall I would say that I don't know, because I sometimes think with that as fans, I wouldn't I think we fall sometimes into that trap of when you get an outtake, 20 years later, 10 years later, whatever it is, it's so exciting that you sort of just you almost do a lot of the work for the song just in the anticipation of it, and you love it because it's that deep cut or it's something and you've not listened to it 1,000 times. If you get say something came out from the Down the Torpedo sessions now, well, you've heard everything on Down the Torpedoes, or most people have heard that album for like 40 years. So you've heard it so much that anything new and fresh would be like, oh man, I love that. So I wonder if that does play into that somewhat sometimes.
So you're suggesting that my affection for the Nobody's Children disc 6 on the playback box set, which everybody should go listen to, is on streaming services. The one that has Got My Mind Made Up, Ways to Be Wicked, Can't Get Her Out, Waiting for Tonight, Traveling, Baby Let's Play House, Wooden Heart, God's Gift to Man, You Get Me High, Come On Down to My House. You Come Through, one of the greatest lost tracks of all time with uh, what's his
Kravitz.
face? What's it? Yeah, Lenny
Yeah.
Kravitz. I was thinking Zoe Kravitz's dad. Uh, Coming in and playing drums and singing, and then Up in Mississippi Tonight, number 12. Ju- when I heard this, I was like, oh my God, where were all these songs and why weren't they on their
Yeah.
original albums? It wasn't because, oh, it's a rarity and I got a rarity and now I like it more. I actually think this is like one of the great lost albums
Yeah,
of all time, certainly for Tom Petty.
I'll give it to you. That's fine. We can agree to disagree sometimes, right? Okay, well, we should start wrapping things up here, man.
Sounds good.
Um, Always an absolute joy, of course, to hang out with you. We didn't even do any chit chat off the top. We didn't do any preamble. I didn't even ask you how you're doing, how life is, how things going. Your boy's knocking it out the park in basketball. He's doing pretty well for
Yeah.
himself, eh?
I mean, the last thing you said to me outside of this was you sent me a Chicago Bears photo, knowing I'm a Packer fan. I don't know, 2 days after a horrible, no good, downright bad, brutal loss. And I was like, get TFOH, Kevin, with this nonsense. This English Bears fan is trolling me. But I suppose that's how you feel when I'm trolling Man United as a Liverpool fan, as an American Liverpool fan. So I think
Of,
it's all fair.
of course.
I will be back in your texts once the Bears lose. Hopefully they lose. I can't imagine them winning the Super Bowl. I don't want to live in a world where the Chicago Bears win another Super Bowl. My son's doing great. Thank you for asking. He's being recruited by a couple of Division III schools. He's got a huge game tonight. Probably going to decide the control of the league, which they haven't won in a few years. And
Okay.
he has led this team to a which you would, I think, appreciate as a soccer player, sharing the ball, moving the ball, passing up a good shot for a great shot. And it's resulted in a lot of winning. And we won 8 straight, and we're going for 9 tonight. So
It's
let's
awesome,
go.
man. Awesome. Okay, well, until we meet again next week, keep listening to and sharing Tom's music. Try to be kind. Try to say I love you to someone at least once a day. Stay safe and healthy. And I'll be back with you next week to talk about Tom Petty. I'm not too sure what the episode is going to be yet, but I'll see you next week. Bye bye.